Sacramento, California, home of the never-ending property sales? Home sales, you say? I thought Sacramento was like the cultural capital of the universe, man. Well, the culture's turned a bit violent, and the universe as we know it, well, sadly it's been compromised. Say what? Yes, folks are moving away from Sacramento and aren't particular where they go as long as there are no gangs. You see, the gang violence, the assaults and murders are, well, they're just too much for the average Joe to contend with. And what about law enforcement, you may ask? Well, they do their best. They really do, and they're not at fault. You see, in an emergency life and death encounter with these gangs, and when literally seconds matter, the police are only minutes away. Wow, so what is Sacramento planning to do to curb this violent gang action? Well, Sacramento, California plans to pay gang members $1.5 million to keep the peace. Wait, what?
I say, Mum, could you put the telly on? The old blowhard is coming on. You know, that American fellow Mike Spears.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Spearsy Spin. Well, before we get started on tonight's show, I want to once again address the issue of show availability. For some of you that write to us here about missed shows, let me explain. Not all shows we do will show up in all markets or on all social media. Why? Because some media produced here may in fact be for direct on-air use only and does not have any supporting attributes such as prologues, intros, music beddings, commercials, or any MP4 formatting. Now, direct on-air shows are in MP3 format, and they can best be described as sound bites that'll be used in other shows to either help solidify programming ideologies or, in many cases, to bolster opposing views for on-air discussions in other markets. Now also, these shows are typically much shorter than our average shows and are much more energized for effect. So that's what that's about. So don't ever be dismayed. Do not let your heart be heavy, I guess that's what they say. Moving on. So how bad has the violence gotten in Sacramento, California? Well, city officials there have voted to pay gang members $1.5 million for a ceasefire. Now, I know what you're thinking. Say what? Yes, it's true. The left-leaning lawmakers there in Sacramento are putting the burden of stopping violent crime in the hands of the people doing the violent crimes. That is, the gangs. Now, just recently, there was a fatal shooting in a city park there in Sacramento, and because of that shooting, and of course, sadly, countless others, the Sacramento City Council unanimously approved a program called Advance Peace in an effort to reduce violent crime. Now, this program, Advance Peace, has some roots, sort of. Well, maybe. Well, possibly. Okay, I have no clue what the hell they're doing here, but if you're a gang member, good news, everyone, you can be paid a cash stipend for graduating from school and staying out of trouble.
Remove the jobs, break the schools, pull back the police. Let the streets flood with drugs. Let violent gangs recruit child soldiers and terrorize neighborhoods. Don't prosecute gun crimes. And when the media looks you in the eye after another bloody weekend in a major American city, call for more gun control. If our politicians are truly using the carnage they refuse to stop to attack the rights of honest, hardworking Americans caught in living hell, then they are guilty of the most despicable form of racism imaginable. What has been allowed to happen in our inner cities is an absolute disgrace. If the same epidemic of poverty, gang violence, and broken schools poison the neighborhoods of the nation's political class, you'd better believe they'd be talking about real solutions, not gun control. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Honey, come in here and listen to this guy.
Why? Is it important?
Yeah, it's important. He's talking about the Trump administration and the CIA, NSA, and FBI investigations.
Oh, Ralph, you know I don't like politics.
Oh, stop talking and just come on over here and listen.
Well, he does have a nice voice. He seems to be educated.
No. Not his voice. Listen to what he's saying.
Well, if what he says is true, then there is a real problem in Washington. So this woman, Susan, what's-her-face, she leaked information or something?
Honey, you have to listen. He said that reports are now showing that information was leaked about Trump's cabinet members. I heard this on the news today as well.
Is this Fox News?
OMG, no. This show is called The Spearsy Spin, and the guy's name is Mike Spears.
Mike Spears. I'm wondering if this is the same man that did all the voiceover work at WNBC Radio in NYC back in the late 70s and early 80s?
Wait, you know this guy?
Well, I don't know him personally, but he did a lot of voices for WNBC 66 Radio and for Michael Sarzinski on that station. That was the only station we listened to back then. I recognize his voice and diction. He did voiceovers and impersonated voices, Howard Cosell and such.
Wow, he's been around that long?
You know, Ralph, listening to Mike Spears talk about politics, well, it's kind of like having an old friend over to chat.
Wait, you mean you like the Spearsy Spin?
Ralph, sit down and shush. I want to hear what Mike's saying.
Okay, a couple of things here to add in. You'll be hearing going forward. We're going to be recognizing in the West Coast some news talk stations that are producing news talk, right? Okay. First, we have News Talk KABC in Los Angeles, California, and News Talk KALW 91.7 FM, San Francisco, California. So, Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg supports this new initiative as he suggests that it'll save innocent lives. I think everyone can get on board with saving innocent lives, but putting up $1.5 million for the solemn oath of gang members to stop being, gang members, well, this idea might not work out. Here's why. Now, in my own and limited contact with those individuals who have identified themselves to be a member of a gang or past member, there are several common denominators that these folks share. Now, first, most appear to be male. They're somewhere between 14 and 32, and they typically are not gainfully employed. Many or most have little or no college. Most appear to be high school dropouts. Many are from dysfunctional homes, and many are either on illicit drugs or have been. Now, the alcohol use amongst these groups tends to be alarming, and that's just to say the least. I think I can safely say that as a whole, these individuals have a credit score of under 400. Now, many have either given birth or have fathered children and provided very little, if any, support for the child, and most are criminals, many are career criminals, and a hefty percentage have enacted violent crimes, and of course there are the murderers of the group as well, depending upon which gang you're looking at. Now, what I'm attempting to point out is that these individuals do not appear to be the type that will honor any contract or agreement. I would suspect that the failure rate of this program will be very high. Now, this is not to say that a few may be reached by this program, but I think the system, is going to get played. Now, the $1.5 million in cash that the gang members will receive comes from the city's general fund. A similar program is being used in Richmond, California, and now Stockton, California, is considering it. So, there you have it. Crime does pay, And if you're old enough to remember the Shadow radio programs, the Shadow always said, "Crime does not pay. The Shadow knows." Oh, I'm sorry, I digress. But what is really playing out here? The answer? Well, the government is circumventing the parental roles of those individuals, the parents of these gang members, who either couldn't or wouldn't be responsible adults and mentors for these kids. Of course, there are those who say, well, you don't understand. Many of these parents grew up in the projects or were poor or both. Many of these parents you speak of have a background of violence against them, abuse, and of course, poverty. Many of these parents are actually drug addicts. So why would you suspect any other outcome than for the city of Sacramento to start taking these excessive measures to try and turn some of these younger people around? Well, if we take a moment to look at the chronology of events here, okay, that led to this desperate and somewhat expensive attempted resolution there in Sacramento, we might find the actual causes. Now, in short, how we went from everything seems normal and functional with regard to Sacramento to, oh my God, write a check to the gang members in payment in lieu of crimes not committed. Now, after this show, I implore you to go to YouTube and search for the following 2.5-minute clip entitled Life in Sacramento, 1950. Now, this was a professionally made short video that shows Sacramento like it was in 1950. The folks are real, they're not actors, and nothing is staged. Now, I know many will say, what the hell does Sacramento 1950 have to do with Sacramento 2017? Actually, the question you should ask is, what negative factors can you identify from 1950 to present day that has caused this city to degenerate or to decay?
I'm a good person. I never bothered anybody. But I can't afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I live in a government high-rise. Gangbangers and drug dealers walk down our halls every day. My neighbors and I were scared. We called the police, but they can't keep us safe. Some of us are too afraid to even leave our apartments. But the housing authority told me if I bought a gun to protect myself, they throw me to the streets. If I'm not free because of my address today, what makes you think you'll be free tomorrow? I marched behind Martin Luther King at Selma. I know my rights. Now I have my gun. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Hello, this is Captain Jack Sparrow. So you've already met this dastardly scoundrel who calls himself Mike Spears. That would mean that you're listening to the Spearsy Spin. Right. By my reckoning, if you give a thumbs up and subscribe, this would make you one of the crew. Savvy?
Now, having already had this exact conversation multiple times, and not just about Sacramento, other cities as well, I can promise you that this idea has always been met with adverse consternation. Now, especially with millennials. However, it seems apparent to me that society has for years failed to correct the errors that have caused us to slip into the disarray that our country appears to be in today. In short, whatever we've been doing for the last 67 years to affect positive change in our society, well, it hasn't worked. So wouldn't the obvious cars, that should be course. I think the obvious course of action would be to go back to a time when things did work, if only to identify those exact issues that have caused the mayhem we see today. For example, now if your car's engine stops on the thruway And in an attempt to fix it, you get out, you check the gas, you check the oil, the battery, the dashboard for error messages, and maybe even look for a squirrel stuck in the intake, error intake there, only to find yourself stranded on the highway. What do? Well, you would call AAA or someone like that who would come out to your location and pick you and your car up and take it to a repair shop. Now, when the mechanic queries you with regard to, how was the car running the day before and last week, and how's it running last month, you'd be able to provide, a brief chronology of the mechanical issues. Now, the mechanic's job is to return your vehicle to a point of good service. In other words, we sometimes have to go back in time to fix what's going on right now. So to put a finer point on this, years ago I was an invited speaker at a Rotary Club meeting outside of Binghamton, New York. I was asked to provide a 10-minute dissertation on any subject I wanted, save two, politics and religion. So, being a young and talented post-grad I thought myself to be, I decided what better talk to give than to detail to the audience the significance of being themselves. I called my talk, "You Are What You Become." In short, who you are is not necessarily defined by who you were. Now, this is a multifaceted narrative that accentuates those theories originally brought forward by Dr. Eric Berne from the University of California at Berkeley in the 1970s. I am a huge fan of Dr. Eric Berne. I've read anything and everything Dr. Berne has ever written. Anyway, in this talk, I asked the folks present to think back to when they were 10. I asked them to think of a cow, a chicken, a frog, a horse, a sheep, and a crow. Now, once they were all on board with my request, I asked them to now picture those exact same creatures as they would appear today. Next, I picked 5 people from the audience to stand up. I asked each one the following question. Did you see any difference from the creatures you viewed in your mind's eye at 10 and how they appeared to you today? And all 5 answered no. All appeared the same. Now, back to 2017 for just a moment. Now, those 5 people saw no difference in the appearance of the creatures I had asked them to view in their mind's eye within the timelines I proposed back then. So, if we could bring those folks back together now, could they, 37 years later, still answer that they saw no change in the creature's appearance or in its animalistic traits? Well, the answer is true. I haven't seen any difference in any of those creatures myself. So what? Well, in that exercise that I just shared with you, not one of the folks suggested or hinted at the fact that they have changed during these same time periods. We all change mentally as well as physically as time moves forward. But moreover, how do we change with regard to being a societal group? Which brings us to, back to Sacramento, California, and the city's decision to pay gang members to become educated, to stop doing crime, and for the love of God, reduce the number of people you kill annually. Is this really the approach Sacramento should take?
Blimey, you're still listening?
To the Ayatollahs of Iran and every terrorist you enable, listen up. You might have met our fresh-faced flower child president and his weak-kneed Ivy League friends, but you haven't met America. You haven't met the heartland, where the people will defend this nation with their bloody, calloused, bare hands. That's what it takes. You haven't met the steel workers and the hard rock miners or the swamp folks in Cajun country who can wrestle a full-grown gator out of the water. You haven't met the farmers, the cowboys, the loggers, and the truck drivers. You don't know the mountain men who live off the land or the brave cops who fight the good fight in the urban war zones. No, you've never met America, and you ought to pray you never do. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Now, don't get me wrong. After this has been out and about for a while, if this works, I'll support it 1,000%. I just wonder, how can we afford to pay all these gangs in all 50 states? Now, we also have to pay all the facilitators of this program in all 50 states. I'm just saying. Can you imagine getting your tax bill that says, gang member taxes, let me see. Oh, yeah, that'll be $50. $50 a year. Gang tax. All right. Bottom line, we as Americans accept for a very small percentage that we know the difference between right and wrong. I think most people do. But going back to 1950 in Sacramento and then slowly moving forward to 2017, we really need to see what caused the problems in Sacramento. And that forces us to face the problems. And believe it or not, this really isn't all that difficult. The difficult part will be having the guts, a determination to correct it. Very difficult decisions to make that will have immediate and long-term effects on us as a society, but for every good American, law-abiding citizen here in America today, including all races, including all religions, the hard decisions you must make if we as a society are to flourish and grow. Well, these are our thoughts. We'd like to know what your thoughts are. So please visit us at thespearsyspin.blogspot.com and let us know what you think. Now, coming up, be looking for our re-release of a story that we brought you a few months ago about a pastor who spent years in prison, convicted of all sorts of crimes, including child sexual rape and polygamy. However, shortly after airing that segment, we received emails suggesting to us that we were wrong. Many listeners are now saying that this pastor was framed, and the folks who wrote in say they can prove it. Now, we're talking about a convicted rapist, pedophile, a sexual predator. Now, he is Pastor Tony Alamo, whose sexual allegations, as well as tons of other charges, put him in prison for life. But listeners are now saying that, well, you have it wrong. He was framed, and here's the proof. So we will weigh the state's case against the pastor, and then we'll look at the evidence our listeners have sent in. We will be fair and balanced, with our interpretation of the facts as we see them. Now, another issue that we've been asked to explore involves Waco, a total extermination plot by the FBI and the ATF. Well, I don't know. Now, somewhere in here, we have folks claiming that there was sensitive leaked computer information by the Waco residents that caused then Attorney General Janet Reno to order the deaths of the residents and destruction of the Waco complex. So say several listeners here on The Spin. Now, listeners have sent a lot of material to us here to suggest that perhaps David Koresh and the Waco complex were involved in much more than religion and commune living. So much so, they believe that the United States Attorney General had them killed. This show will most likely be released in segments because of the amount of information and the length of it. So be watching for the release of Waco, Tolerate or Terminate. Now, we are also working on another story, and this one you'll definitely want to listen to as it rolls out, and it's titled The Most Bankrupt States in America. You got to ask yourself, is your state broke and why, and where did the money go? Now, that show will come out late October or early November, as I understand, so be looking for it. And you may be shocked at what your tax dollars are not doing for you. Folks, remember, there's only one world, and we all have to live in it, so please, encourage others to live peacefully. We'll see you next time.
Well, Mike has once again delivered a jolly good show. Bob's your uncle.